All right. Looks like we're live. Has it said we're gone live?
I think so. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, sweet. All right, Nick. How about you open us up in a word of prayer?
Oh, okay. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us together in such short notice. I know everyone's busy tomorrow, so it's great that we can all find a way to talk about you, God, and that we can go through the important things today. Uh, yeah, I hope that these conversations today will be fruitful. And yeah, in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Right.
Well, for those who are joining us online on YouTube, welcome to week 2. Technically, it's like week 4 of our podcast, but this is our second one that we've broadcasted. So, welcome to the second session. We're going to be wrapping up this month's lessons for our kids program. It's been a pretty cool little session. I feel that we don't talk about contentment very often in Christian circles, and so it's been pretty great to be able to do that and to talk a bit more in depth. Maybe just a bit of an icebreaker. I'll just share. I'm gonna share screen, but last, like I saw on Facebook today, and I shared it with Nick and Shannon earlier today. I don't know if they took notice of it, but
Oh, yeah.
here it is.
Yeah.
See on the screen. It was funny because for some reason 9 years ago I posted this up as part of a devotion that I was reading, and it says, whether God gives us more than we imagined or far less than we desired, we can trust that his plans are better than ours. When God says no to our request, we can be sure it's for the best. So I thought that was pretty cool. Just a little bit of something that came up. Nick also shared a bit of a meme of Veggie Tales.
Bro.
So yeah, it's I think it's been good, and it gives us perspective on realizing that, like, it's not about what we want, or what we get or what we don't get, and if we make it that focus, then we're only going to want more. And so, yeah, it's pretty interesting to be able to go on that journey and realizing that actually true contentment comes from peace from Christ. And if we look elsewhere, we're going to keep wanting more and more and more. But we're going to go into today's discussion. We're looking at the book of Corinthians. Nick, bit of a question. Let's see if you know it. Nick's actually, just for those who are tuning in, Nick's actually a new Christian. Quite a new Christian. Don't want to call him out, but it's actually really cool to see his journey and his passion and fervor. So those who are watching, just a bit of context. But Nick, I just wanted to give you a question here. Do you know who wrote the book of Corinthians?
Can I use the internet? Can I phone a friend?
Yes, you can phone a friend. Who would you like to phone?
Shannon. Who wrote the book of Corinthians?
Oh my. Peter? Is it
I
not
think it's
Peter?
Peter.
I reckon
Uh,
it's Peter.
Do you want to lock that in?
I think I'm gonna lock that in.
All right, lock it in, Eddie. Well, the answer is no, it's not Peter.
No.
Your friend betrayed you. Sorry, bro.
Yeah.
Damn.
I was on a side note. We just go a bit of a tangent. I watched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and in the past, it used to be like you'd phone a friend, but now it's you ask Eddie, who's the host, and so you go, hey Eddie, do you think you know the answer? And then he'll be like, yeah, I reckon it's this. So I was going to give you that. I was going to give you that option to ask me, but you chose to ask Shannon before I gave you the chance. So
Sorry, I haven't watched that show in a long time. That was the last time I watched it.
yes. So the answer is actually Paul.
The
The
same Paul.
The
Okay.
same Paul that we spoke about 4 weeks ago. It's the same Paul, and he actually wrote multiple letters to Corinthians. And so, if you look in the Bible, and this gives you guys a bit of context of how the Bible is formed. And so this is in the New Testament, and as part of the New Testament, you've got the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and then after that, you've got the Book of Acts, which is written by the same Luke as the one in the book of Luke. Okay, And then after that, you've got Romans, Galatians, Ephesians, Colossians, First Corinthians, Second Corinthians, all those, and they're all letters, and those letters are addressed to the church, and the church is the name of the church that is in the letter. So in this instance, it's the Church of Corinth, and so Paul's writing to that church, and so he's actually written multiple letters, and two of those letters are part of the Bible. Like scholars believe there is more letters, because what happens is it's a bit like a response. It's like Paul writes to them, and then they write back, and then Paul writes to them again. And so the reason why they believe that there's more than just these two letters is because there's missing context, where it's like, wait, when did they talk about this? And so just so you know that there is another letter, but it hasn't been discovered. And so we can only go with what we have found. And so we're going to go through 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1 to 15. And so that was a slight bit of a tangent, but I thought it'd be cool for you guys to at least know, that that's where it's from, where it sits in the whole Bible. And so, let's go through that. I'm going to screen share again, and then you guys can see the verse. All right, cool. Everyone can see that?
Yeah.
All right, great. How about we just read two at a time. All right, so I'll start off. So, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the grace that God has given to the churches in Macedonia. They have suffered a great deal, but in their suffering, their joy was more than full. Even though they were very poor, they gave very freely. How about we go to Nick?
Okay. I tell you that they gave as much as they could. The thing's covering it. In fact, they gave even more than they could, completely on their own. They begged us for the chance to share in serving the Lord's people in that way.
They did more than we expected. First, they gave themselves to the Lord. Then they gave themselves to us because that was what God wanted. Titus had already started collecting money from you, so we asked him to help you finish making your kind gift.
You do well in everything else. You do well in faith and in speaking. You do well in knowledge and in complete commitment. And you do well in the love we have helped to start in you. So make sure that you also do well in the grace of giving to others.
I am not commanding you to do it, but I want to test you. I want to find out if you really love God. I want to compare your love with that of others. You know the grace shown by our Lord Jesus Christ. Even though he was rich, he became poor to help you. Because he became poor, you can become rich. Shen.
Here's my opinion about what is best for you in that matter. Last year, you were the first to give. You were also the first to want to give. So finish the work, then your desire to do it will be matched by your finishing it. Give on the basis of what you have.
Do you really want to give? Then the gift is measured by what someone has. It is not measured by what they don't have. We don't want others to have it easy at your expense. We want things to be equal.
Right now, you have plenty in order to take care of what they need. Then they will have plenty to take care of what you need. The goal is to even things out. It is written, the one who gathered a lot didn't have too much, and the one who gathered a little had enough.
Cool. Fun question. Do you guys know? Let me share screen again. Sorry. Do you guys know where this is quoted from? This last part where it says "it is written." Since we finished off that passage and it landed there, I thought it'd be cool just to see if you guys remember where that came from. The one who gathered a lot didn't have too much, and the one who gathered a little had enough. Does this sound familiar? My hint to you guys is we spoke about it one of these weeks that have passed. Just a guess.
Exodus.
That's it.
Oh,
That's it.
hey, wow.
And this was talking about the gathering of the manna, if you guys remember
Oh yeah,
the
the
bread last
bread.
Yeah,
week,
the bread
and there
Right.
thing.
was those who were like really greedy and try to
Mm.
take more than they needed, and
Right, I
so
remember.
those people who actually took more than they needed actually didn't have very much, and then the guys who just gathered a little bit, just exactly what they needed, had enough, and so it was showing that when you trust God and take what you need, right, and you're not living in gluttony and fear, God would provide as needed. And so it's interesting because it all links. We're going back to this whole thought of you know having enough, having too much, being able to give. And I think we mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if it was on air, but it was the whole idea of contentment. Um, Let me just open it up. The definition that we've been going with contentment is learning to be okay with what you have, right? And actually, we kind of landed on contentment being learning to be okay to give what you have. I'm not sure if you guys remember that. It was,
think
I think it was
it
the
might have been
first.
2 weeks ago.
I think it might have been the first session. I
Uh,
remember Clement was there.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And so, yeah, it's like it really goes down to that fundamental idea of, ultimately contentment hinges on the idea of are you ready to give? Because if you're not willing to give what you have, then are you truly content? But we're gonna touch on that a little bit later. Maybe I'll just open the floor for you guys, Nick, Shannon. Anything in particular stood out for you in this passage?
I think verse 8.
Yep.
I'm not commanding you to do it, but I want to test you. I want to find out if you really love God, and I want to compare your love with that of others. I think that's like, I think that's really important because he just spent all this time. Paul spent all this time writing about kind of a sort of responsibility, building up on this idea of a responsibility that people of God should do. But then he's like, I mean, I'm not forcing you to do it, but I think it's a really good indicator of how much you love God, and that's, I don't know, that feels good to me.
Hmm. Yeah. And what was based on that? Like, what is he commanding them to do? Like, what is he testing them with? Like, since you brought up that point of verse 8, what was the thing that Paul was trying to test them or asking them to do as part of proving their faith?
I don't know if I misremember, but is it like, is it money? I didn't. Uh,
Yeah, well,
is
money's definitely related.
Yeah,
It talks about it in verse 6.
yeah.
Titus had already started collecting money from you.
Mm,
So we asked him to help you finish making your kind gift.
mm,
That's definitely related. I think more so verse 7, where it
mm,
says, so make sure you do well in the grace of giving to others.
mhm.
So ultimately, it's giving. It's going
Right.
like, hey, what are you giving? Whether it's money, that's one thing, but
Yeah.
maybe it's love, maybe it's shelter or food. I think definitely giving is, in terms of money, is definitely where it hurts the most. Like that's where hits closest to home, is the
Mm,
biggest sacrifice we could probably do here on earth,
mm.
apart from laying down our life for another. Yeah. Shannon, any thoughts? Anything that comes out for you?
I think that's something that probably stood out for me with like the part where it says like at the end, we don't want others to have it easy at your expense. We want things to be equal. Right now you have plenty in order to take care of what they need, then they will have plenty to take care of what you need. The goal is to even things out. That interests me because it's kind of like a bit hard for me to wrap my head around the idea of like you doing a lot so that other people can benefit from that and then in turn they give back sort of thing.
Hmm.
Because I guess it like reminds me of like my workplace, for example, right? So Like we put the hard work into serving, and then they pay us back, obviously,
Yeah.
because it's literally it's hospitality.
Yeah.
But also like
Is that
you
through
make people
tips?
happy, so it's great, I guess.
Yeah.
But and you give people their food and it's satisfying. But I guess it's like that sort of like that sort of concept just interests me, I guess. So I think that that stood out because it reminds me of like the whole Jesus idea, right?
Yeah.
And it reflects that in this entire chapter. So
Yeah. And it's pretty interesting in hospitality that, like, you could be working super hard, but then the tips just end up splitting among everybody,
Mm.
yeah,
So then it's just like,
so
oh,
you're
but
like, oh
really, I did a lot more customer service than the other dude,
Mm.
or I
yeah,
was very attentive and I saw the rich guy give 100, and
yeah,
and that was specifically to my work, but that's gonna get split evenly across the team. It's
yeah,
a very the kind of, I guess, way we see life, especially here in Western society, is very individual. We have a very strong emphasis on achievement as an individual, and really looking out for ourselves. And after that, you look after your family, like brothers and
yeah,
sisters, mum and dad. But ultimately, it's very centric on, hey, you got to get yourself right first,
Mm.
and then you help others. That's a very, yeah, and when you talk about splitting tips, or sharing things equally, like this whole idea of, it says verse 13, right?
yeah,
We want things to be equal, and it's hard because one guy could be working a lot harder, for whatever they're working for, and then you might not be working very much. And I guess that's how society's kind of built up, in taxes and all that kind of stuff. Like the rich get taxed more, and then the people who aren't working, and the guys who maybe are unemployed, are getting all these benefits,
Mm.
even though they're not really contributing. And it's one of those things that we need to reconcile as followers of Christ, where we go like, hey, what am I doing with my you know, extra resources, or even what I'm blessed with currently? How do I bless someone who isn't, so blessed, or doesn't
Mm.
have it well, whether they deserve it or not, whether they earned it or not?
Mm.
Yeah, are we as followers of Christ called to, reach out to those who aren't deserving of it, because maybe they waste it away, they spend it on illicit things, they are very, just very instant gratification, and just spend it on things that maybe they shouldn't be spending it on? Does that mean they don't deserve our help, help from followers of Christ? Yeah, because at the end of the day, we only can speak from our own, as followers of Christ. We
Yeah.
can't speak on behalf of humanity, and go like, well, actually, all humans should be kind to those who don't deserve it. I can't say
Yeah.
that, but I do know that we can speak from followers of Christ perspective. And so, yeah, so maybe what we can do, we go to the first question. Was there any other points that comes from that?
When you brought up verse 13, I was like, I feel like this is where a lot of people get trapped or kind of get a little bit tunnel vision. We don't
Mm,
want others to have it easy at your expense. So like Paul makes it clear that, hey, we're not asking you to do free labor or like just like break your back to help people and they can just live a lavish life, right?
mm,
But then I think as people, as just normal Christians or just normal people in general, we're like, okay, taking that logic, if I have to work too hard and I feel like someone else is reaping all the rewards, then I shouldn't work as hard. I shouldn't give as much because, well, they're not going to give that much back and look what they're doing with what they have. So
yeah,
I feel like that is something that um that people might get stuck in their
yeah.
lives. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely confronting when you think about it. You go like, well, actually, can I give it to others? And to some extent, maybe if they are undeserving of it, maybe they're not pulling their weight, maybe they shouldn't receive so much, because it says we don't want others to have it easy at your expense. So to some extent, Paul is saying, hey, if they are freeloaders, and they're really not trying to contribute to the team, to the house, then maybe, it doesn't necessarily include them to some extent. But ultimately, the call is definitely to do something that still hurts, which is to give. And so let's go into the first question today. It says, what can you do when you don't think you have anything you can use to help someone?
That's a really interesting question, actually.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my goodness, I don't have any kind of tools to help you. What am I supposed to do? I can't help you. I guess you're on your own. That's what most people would say, I think.
Yeah.
But I think something that you can do when you don't think you can have anything to use to help someone, I guess, is just you can always sort of you don't have to do the work for them in order to help them, if that makes sense. You can always just I guess be some sort of support for them. You don't have to support them in for example, in doing the thing that they're doing for them, or at least do it for them, but you can always make their life a little bit easier by supporting them in other ways that you can.
So then even another way of rephrasing this question is, how can you be creative with what you do have?
Yeah, which is a really good question to ask.
Because I'd say a lot of and in the context of kids, a lot of them don't have endless amounts of money that they can access to give, right? And so what do they have? What would there be a particular thing that you feel kids would have? Since we're kind of preparing for a conversation with children on Sunday, what would be something that they could have that they could use to help someone?
I think it's the most valuable thing. Yeah, the most most important thing, valuable thing is probably innocence, because they don't know what they can't and can do in this world at this point in time, because there's so much they have to learn about how the real world works and whatnot, and all those rules and whatever. But because they don't know that much, they can see so much more. They have that greater sense of perspective that could definitely help adults or older people who've lived kind of any kind of life to see what they basically can't see anymore.
So then on Sunday, when someone sees this question, what can you do when you don't think you have anything you can use to help someone? The answer to it is obviously, hey, we've got to be creative. We've got to use what we do have, right? Because obviously you can't use what you don't have to help someone because you don't have it. But now that you're being creative, now what are some outside the box things kids can do? What could a leader guide some of the kids to think about? What would be something that they could, let's say, okay, I'll use a bit of a case study. Okay, let's say there was a compassion kid. It was a compassion Sunday. There's all these sponsor kids that are all on the screen, all at the kiosk at the lobby, our lobby. And then there's oh, cool. How do we sponsor them? What can a kid do to create a change, make a difference in that situation? What do you reckon they could do as one example? They can't physically pay $600 a year, right? They can't go oh yeah, I'm just gonna take that out of my pocket, pay you. I'm gonna pay for it.
The thing is, I don't know if you remember that one time in main service, but they brought in somebody to talk about this girl who collected all these books for this school or started selling socks and then giving the money away to people who needed it. I'm kids nowadays are great. They could do such cool things that I couldn't do when I was a kid. I didn't have the brain for it. I didn't have the at the time, I didn't think it was possible. But like nowadays, it's just if you have an idea, if you have like the biggest idea or just any idea, I think you could make it work. So
Yeah. So
like a
maybe let's
fundraiser or something like
let's
that.
list out a couple of things, like a couple of really practical, like they can do it.
Yeah.
What are some of those things? Or we can do it. Like Nick, you can do it, or Shannon, you can do it.
So
What are some of those?
I guess like I think spreading awareness is one.
Yep.
For example,
Mm.
like kids can literally design things for like certain like awareness sort of campaigns and stuff like that, or they could
Mm.
go around telling people with do you know how like the way that kids talk, when they go up to someone and they tell you something, it's so like that, like
Yep.
So
so
much energy.
confident and full
Yeah.
of
So you're saying
energy.
they have an influence,
Mm.
right?
They do. They
They
seem
have a
so
voice.
charismatic and confident sometimes.
Yeah, great.
Like I guess
When you and the
kind of like
butterflies.
yeah. So I think oh yeah, story time. I'm probably not gonna name the kid, but like basically I tutored him
Yep.
and he comes up to me, it's the same, this is the same kid from last week, and it's great. Anyway, he comes up to me, he just goes, Shannon, I have something very important to tell you. And I'm like, yes, what's up? And he's just like, can you plant some milkweed? It's very, very easy to do. And I was like, okay. And he's like, all you need to do is Google how to plant the plants and then plant it like it says they're supposed to. So I was like, okay, I plant it. Well, then, like, and he's like, but there's one kind of very hard thing, but I think you can do it. I think you can definitely do it. And I just went, what's the hard part? And he's just like, you have to get a license. And he's like, I think you can get a license to milkweed, right? Because you're over 18, you can get a license.
Yeah.
And I just went, bro. But yeah, something like that. It's kind of just like the whole thing where you're a kid and you go to your parents and then you just like just do it forehead sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Five
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do
just
it
do
five
it
head.
five head.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then parents are like, okay. But then it kind of makes them smile and keep going.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, I think that was probably where I was alluding to. It's like kids have a direct influence to their parents.
Mm.
I think kids don't realize the amount of influence they have, especially to parents. Whether they. I remember one of the kids at his church. He's one of our kids leaders now, and I also won't name him. But his dad started coming back to church because of the impact that he saw, like the joy that the son was showing, and the excitement that he had to go to church. And so it actually brought the dad back to church. His dad actually,
That's wholesome.
yeah, his dad actually became kind of recommitted his life to Christ and became a kids leader at a point. So now those who are watching, maybe you know who it is. But yeah, it was really really powerful to see. But I definitely think the first audience that exists for children to practice influence and you know um, even being creative with you know tapping into resources is definitely your parents. That's probably the simplest, easiest one because you're not having to raise money per se, but you can just go like, hey, I really want to sponsor a kid. I want to write letters to him. I want to do these. Maybe that's something. Or there's my friend Billy. He was in a car accident and they need funds, blah blah blah, that kind of thing. Mum, Dad, can you spare some money to help support them because they're not going through a good time? Things like that. Raising awareness, as you have mentioned already. Would there be another? Or I guess let's go with the parents thing. Let's just take it one step further. A little bit of extra creativity, and this is inspired by my little brother. My youngest brother, he's in grade 6. His name's Hewitt. And he's actually really cool because he actually does chores around the house, right, to earn a bit of money. And then it's really interesting because you know what he does with that money? He actually sends that money to Vietnam to his grandparents.
Hmm.
Not because he's actually my half brother, so it's actually my stepmom's parents. And so I thought, wow, that's really incredible. That he can save money, avoid spending things on himself, buying milkshakes, Maccas, or whatever it is. But he actually takes the time to save it, put it away, right? He ends up with like all this cash in his pocket, in his wallet. He loves his wallet, right? It's like this blue wallet, and he loves it, right? And then he sends that to Vietnam, and it's so wholesome. It's just so incredible, you know. And so maybe that's another way, you know, like maybe you might negotiate with your parents, you know, and you go, hey, how about I don't get my Christmas present this year? You know, like I know I wanted this bike and you said I was going to get it for Christmas. How about we don't get that bike and let's give it to this person who's really in need? You know, I think those are really powerful, influential things. And who knows, that kid might end up getting both, you know?
Yeah.
Who knows, right? Because you might have that heart and then you might, who knows, right? It just depends on the parent situation and how they raise their children. But that's just, I think that's just incredible. If we can lead children to think about others and foregoing some particular wants and desires for the purpose of, you know, giving to someone else. Yeah, Nick, any closing comments?
No, I'm just taking that in because that's great. Like the story about your brother and like I think giving, especially with the holiday season coming up, it's a good time to do that. It's a good time to practice those
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
yeah, and just even like I feel like I remember, like I don't know if it really happened to me or not, but I remember growing up in high school, not getting lunch very regularly, like just my parents weren't very present, so I would go days with like, you know, in school without food or whatever. And I'm pretty sure I had friends noticing that, and they would share a little bit of something, you know, and I think it's just so special, you know, when you have people who just look out for you. And so likewise, that's our opportunity. If we notice someone's not eating, you know, or you know, at school, things like that, I think it's just like going like, hey, looking for opportunities to give. I think that's probably a key. So maybe if we were to wrap that up into kind of a couple of key points, maybe one is be creative, right? Maybe number two would be use your influence. And then number three is actually look for
Yeah.
opportunities. Like be vigilant, keep an eye out. So yeah, that's probably a good way to see it. Um, the next question is, what's one thing you can do this week to use what you have to help someone else? I think this is pretty straightforward. And I think if we went through the first question and were robust like that, it would lead kids to kind of thinking about it a little bit more. But how about for you guys personally? What's one thing you can do?
Let me just share a story of high school Shannon, I think is more applicable here, I reckon. So, I used to do this thing where I would make like dinner the night before. My mom would make dinner the night before, and I know that like one of my friends didn't really have food. So I'd bring like two containers of food, and then I'd give one to them and be like, hello, lunchtime.
Hmm.
Do you want food? And so I give them food, and then I'd have the other container. And we had like so much at home anyway, and I was probably gonna eat it for like that night's dinner anyway as well. So I was like, wouldn't hurt to give someone some. So I'd ask my parent like the night before. I'd be like, hey mom, can I bring a container for someone? Or like sometimes I'd like bake brownies for like literally everyone. And I
Mm.
was like, I want to make you guys brownies because food is great. And
Yeah.
I think, and we're all like studying and we all need like the extra, like, sort of like sugar boost. So here's something to help you get through your exam at 2:30 p.m.
Yeah, that's
The
so
things,
good.
so, yeah. So
Yeah.
if you ever want to make food for your friends, go ahead and do it. Just maybe like set out like maybe like a Saturday or Sunday night or something, and then bring it to school on the Monday, and it's great.
Mm. Also, another one is buying in bulk. You
Oh yeah.
know, sometimes just the idea of buying things in bulk just gives us the opportunity to give, and it doesn't cost as much. You know, like if I was to buy a Gatorade from school, it'd be like $3 or $4.50. But and if I bought it at Woolies, I would have gotten two. You know,
Yeah.
so even being wise with what you have can sometimes multiply your impact or your reach, or maybe you realize that oh, I'm buying food from the canteen, or I'm eating out, I'm getting a coffee, and it costs me like, $5 for a coffee. But if I just make a coffee at home, or, if I just go to 7-Eleven, grab a coffee, that's $1, which
Mm,
means that I could buy a coffee for someone else, or I could start to save that money and put it elsewhere. And so I think wisdom with our resources is probably something that we can do to really make enable giving a little bit more. It
mm,
makes it a bit more comfortable to give, and it just requires that little bit of thought. Like Shannon said, like baking. Like you're using your skills to create something, a product that if you were to buy outside would be ridiculous. I go to a cafe and buy a brownie, it's like $4.
mm.
And so it's like if I just bake a tray, then it costs me only the flour, the chocolate, the eggs, and then you've got this meaningful gift that you can bless someone with, because you put a bit of time and thought into it. Yeah. Nick, anything?
Um, I I think like for me in high school, I really appreciated when my friends like it's kind of silly, but I was super socially awkward and it was very difficult for me to like even like go shopping. Like my grandparents would encourage me to go like actually buy stuff myself because they're like, you need to learn social skills. And I'm like, okay. But in high school, I had a little bit of a cheat because I'd ask my friends, hey, you know what? I have $5, but I'm only going to use three. If you go to the canteen and buy this thing for me, you can buy whatever you want with the change. And then he's like, okay, yeah, cool. So I felt like we had like a really good like relationship there. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's all I can. That's what I'm recalling with this question.
Yeah.
Business.
Trade offer. Let's go.
Uh,
Stonks.
you
Yeah.
didn't you didn't want to wait in line, so you
Yeah.
paid him. You paid
No,
him
it
the spare
wasn't that.
change.
It wasn't that. Talking to
You just
like the
didn't want to
lunch
talk to
ladies was
people.
like, ugh.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
And then like standing in line, if you're next to someone you know, they're gonna start small talk and it's gonna suck. So me in high school didn't want that. I just avoided it completely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's pretty
which is
funny. I
which
like
is
that.
actually pretty cool, because to some extent, doing that actually built your relationship with that other person.
Hmm.
That gets like a decent deal, right?
We're best
And
friends
so
now.
yeah, yeah, and so one of the cool things about that, and like maybe we don't need to, really follow this analogy completely, but to some extent, it's like sometimes our weaknesses can lead us into creative things
Hmm.
to somehow build a connection with somebody, you know, and so it's one of those things where actually God can actually use things in ways we don't understand, and so sometimes it can be through leveraging some of our weaknesses, and then God does things through that. Just a random thought. It's not really
Hmm.
like go like, oh, you can't really use that example everywhere. It's not universal, but it's just an interesting thought. Yeah. So yeah, Nick, would there be something in particular you could apply to your life today and kind of go like, hey, maybe I can start thinking about being generous to this kind of thing, this person, or
I To this person in particular or just people in general?
it could be a real opportunity this
Yeah.
coming week, in the week ahead.
Hmm.
Mull on
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I'm thinking
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like the only thing that's coming to mind is like I've actually been doing this. I've been purposely trying to do this because I felt like it's time to give back to something. Before I was a Christian, it was more like I'm doing this because I feel like this is a good thing to do. So I just give back to something. But now we know it's like give back to the people of Christ and all the good people out there. But
Hmm.
uh in high school, socially awkward, couldn't really communicate with people, couldn't really like uh go out of my way to do things because it just bugged me. It just made me feel so terrible. But now I'm like a little bit more practice and I feel like I'm a little bit more confident in those things. So I've been actively accepting opportunities to like speak for other people when they need it because I know people who still struggle with that. And I think it's it's good practice for me, but also I'm doing something really important that I think most people would brush it off and they're like, oh, that's just stupid, right? Like don't worry, I won't do it or I don't need it. But if you go that through those lengths to like do those social interactions for them, I don't know. I felt like that's the thing that I'm doing at the moment.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I reckon for me, just in my current state of life, I think being able to realize that there's actually so much need, especially in the new parents category. I think for me, just in the past, I've been a bit blasé about it, not realizing what kind of struggles could exist and what kind of needs that occur. So I think for me, being able to take that time just to check up on somebody, just to create, maybe even create an opportunity for an outlet to talk to them, or send food, that kind of thing. I think definitely during this COVID period, it's definitely been a greater opportunity for me to do something like that, just send food to people for their birthdays and whatnot.
Mm.
Yeah, that's probably something for me, to have a think about and go, hey, who can I bless this week? Maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's a meal, you know?
Mm.
Yeah. Um, okay, next question. Oh, my eyes.
Hay fever, bro.
The hay fever, the dust. I know. Next question. What does contentment have to do with generosity? We
I
touched
think we
on
know the
this.
question. I think we know the answer because it's like
Yes.
it wraps up with with our definition, like being content to give away what we actually have.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like the ultimate form of generosity. Yeah.
Ultimate form of contentment, you mean?
Well, and
Both.
generosity.
Both,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because you give away what you have.
Yeah.
So, and
That's
you're
right.
okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it all hinges back on the whole idea of knowing that everything we have belongs to God.
Mm.
Everything we have is, all the peace that we get, all of the material things that we get, it's ultimately because God provided it. And that goes back to that initial quote that I picked up just now, that I shared earlier, where it was, let me just pull it up. Whether God gives us more than we imagine or far less than we desired, we trust that His plans are much better than ours. When God says no to our request, we can be sure that it's for the best.
Mm.
And I think once we're in that place, that real knowledge and understanding that God is with us, He's providing everything we need, and whether it's provided or it's not provided, is that we know God knows best. Like the song Untitled, Mother knows best, right? But it's actually God knows best. And so we can just wholeheartedly, to some extent blindly trust, that He's got our back. And so actually, even if we give everything away, even foolishly, to some extent foolishly give everything away, ultimately, as long as you're in that mindset of, hey, when I gave it, even though it may come across as foolish, I felt that in that moment, God was leading me to do that, to love that person, to drop $100 in a homeless guy's cup, whatever it is. It may be foolish, it may be enabling, things that, like, we wouldn't know, right? Like, it's a very Vietnamese thing. It's like, oh, don't give to the poor, don't give to the guy on the street, and they call it scare, right? They call it, they're like heroin addicts, right? And it's like, you're just enabling their bad habits, by giving it. Don't give it, It's like, but if God prompts us to give it, then who are we to say no? Who are we to withhold generosity? And are we not giving because we don't want to enable, or is it because it hurts us? It takes away from our luxury. Like, yeah, it's a deep thought, but definitely something we need to think about. Yeah, and so yeah, ultimately generosity. I mean, contentment is being able to give what you have and being okay with that. Yeah. Shannon, any thoughts? Contentment and generosity.
Contentment. I think like if you're content with what you have, right, you're more able to freely give in general. Or maybe you find contentment in giving. You could like be content with being like, hey, I'm going to be generous and give. So, and that makes me feel content. So it could be that like you just feel good when you give people things, or like when you're feeling generous, right? It feels good, I guess, because the things you receive from it may not necessarily be materialistic, and it can be a lot more like wholesome, I suppose. So you can feel
Yeah.
content with all of that.
Yeah. Ultimately, generosity comes at a loss. It comes at a cost, you know?
Mm.
No such
Yeah.
thing as generosity for a gain, you know? if you're in the
Yeah.
business of generosity for a gain, then you're not really generous.
Yeah.
You're just taking an opportunity to gain something.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
cool. Any other thoughts on this one, or maybe we'll move on?
I think it's pretty simple. I think with all the stuff we've talked about in the past 2 weeks, 4 weeks,
Yeah.
and today, that definition is really expanding and growing on that idea of being content to give away what you have.
Yeah.
Probably equates to generosity as well.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. And maybe I just share, and I don't want to just like kind of. It's not really a brag, because actually I'm at a loss. But I remember like every Compassion Sunday is another Sunday where we end up with more money leaving our account monthly, pretty much.
Mm.
So it started off at Hillsong. My wife would sponsor one kid.
Mm.
His name is Kofi, from somewhere in Africa. I can't remember. And then from there, it was a Compassion Sunday, and then we sponsor another one, and then another one, and so now we're at 4 in total. And I remember that conversation I had after the second one. It was once we got to 3 and 4, and that was like to me, like what was the order? It was one first, and then we did 2 at the same time, and then that was like, how about we pick them to be in line with our birthdays? So we picked our birthdays, right? Like we're so first world problems, like
Yeah.
that we kind of trivialize some of these things. I don't know, but at the end of the day, we're still giving, but it's interesting. And so we picked one each, and we were like, okay, we're going to give, we're going to support missions out there, because we physically can't be there at the moment. And then I remember it was like Compassion Sunday, and Nat was like, hey, we're going to sponsor a 4th one. Sorry, give me a sec. I'm just going to mute.
That story was so wholesome that it made him cry, guys.
Yeah.
Confirmed.
Confirmed.
Made his throat hurt and his head hurt and his sniffling. So wholesome.
Intermission.
Yeah, so excuse me for that. But pretty much I said to her, hey, I think we've got enough. We've got 3. We've got enough. And then she said to me, but we've got enough.
Yeah.
As in, like, we've got enough. I'm like, that's a good point, And it's like, what is another, $60 a month, $50 a month, when we've got enough, we've got everything we need and even more, And so the challenge actually goes back to, like, what am I hoarding for? What am I accumulating? What am I maximizing? Like, yes, that money, like, over 10 years is like 20K. It's like, that's like, I could be maximizing my wealth. I could be putting that into crypto,
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
We're not going that.
no.
The ads I get on that, I'm just done. I'm just done with those ads,
Yeah.
bro.
But it's like, like, what if I, didn't give that and then put it into crypto last year, I could have $10,000 right now,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like all of those what ifs come into play. Like, what am I missing out on? Am I
Mm.
maximizing my wealth? And actually, financial security is probably, and this is a bit controversial, it's a bit of a, I don't know,
Financial
it's,
security is a myth.
huh?
It's what?
It's,
It's like financial security is a myth.
no. It's to some extent, it's it's a lie. That, not that it's not true. It's it's good to have financial security, but if our goal is financial security, are we relying on generation of wealth, for peace in our life, or are we looking to God? And yes, it's good. I'm not saying like, hey, be irresponsible with your money, don't save. I'm not saying that. I think those things are really good, wise things that we do, right? But I think to some extent some people withhold giving in the now because they say, I will wait until later when I have more, or when I'm able to create financial stability, or some people try to be financially free, where they don't have to work a day in their life ever again, you know, and so they're working towards that, right? But ultimately, like, that goal shouldn't get in the way of us giving. And so it's just a challenge. I think it's not that I'm saying don't do that, don't chase after financial freedom,
You're
or
not commanding them to do it. You just what it's just a test.
it's just a
Yeah,
test.
yeah. You really want to find out if we love God.
Yeah. I just want to know if you love God.
Oh,
And
yeah.
no, and it's like, it's not that I'm saying don't do it at all. Like, don't aim for that. Like, I think it's great to aim for it, but I think if it takes away from your generosity in the now, then you may have a problem, and at what point in the future will you actually be able to give? Like, will your expenses go up because your earning goes up? Are you going to buy a bigger house because you can afford to buy a bigger house? Then your repayments are higher. Like, all those things come into play. And when you get into the whole idea of creating security financially, you're just going to continue to open a can of worms, because you're going to, oh, I want more, but I want more, but that's not enough yet. I'm not ready yet. It's like, when are you ready? The answer is give when it hurts, because if it hurts, then you're giving.
Mm.
I think something I'm gonna put out there as well is like, from a generational point of view, some people might not agree with this. My parents is being one example. I have wanted to like
Asian parents.
Asian parents. Oh my goodness. Okay, so like for example, right? If like one of my friends is struggling, sometimes I kind of want to give or something like that. Or like if someone's struggling, I kind of want to give sometimes, because I'm like, the struggle, like I have more than enough. I'm not even using it, and I'm like, I think if I don't need to like use this, I can give it to someone else and help them out, like let's say financially, for example, because I definitely have enough. I make enough. I work, and I can help someone else out financially. I will do so, because I feel like I want to, because I don't need all of this. I'm covering my expenses. I'm working. I'm all right. I'm like pretty comfortable myself, kind of thing. But my parents are the kind of people who will be like, don't ever give too much, or something like that. Or if they saw what I was doing, they would be really upset. I
Yeah.
know that for sure. And so I'm like, not a conversation I've ever had with them, but I know that they'd be definitely really upset, because there are times where I've like been in like the car or something. My parents have been like, "Oh yeah, by the way, with like financially with your body, don't spend too much, and like obviously like take care of yourself first, and like make sure you have more than enough in your savings and stuff like that."
Mm.
And the way they go about it is very like lead to go straight towards financial security and financial freedom.
Mm.
But I think financial security for me is like I'm able to support myself and have extra
Yeah.
and still be comfortable.
Yeah. And I would even take that a step further, and
Yeah.
this goes into our next question. But financial security is actually when you trust in God. You know, when you wholeheartedly go, God, you are my supplier, and so I'm going to be obedient to when you call me to be generous. You know, I'm not even
Yeah.
going to think twice to be generous because I know you are there for me.
Mm.
You know, and I think it's like it hits the nail in the head because it's like actually, if God is leading you, if you're in a deep relationship with God and you have faith in Him, and you trust that when you obey His commands and His promptings for your life, then you're going to be looked after. You know, you're gonna be okay because God's going to give enough. He's going to give everything you need.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean like I'm not here to say you give $1,000 to the church and it's going to multiply to $10,000 and you're going to be $10,000 richer. No, I'm not
Oh
saying
boy.
that, right? And the problem is that there are people out there who do say that, invest in the kingdom because it's going to invest back in you tenfold, 100-fold, and it's very like prosperity based. It's like you get more, but actually, it's not to do with that. And I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna say when you do give generously, God looks after you and He blesses you. There's no doubt. And whether that's in monetary gain or in your heart or in your eternal salvation, actually, He has already blessed you infinitely,
Mm.
because you're getting eternal life, which is
Yeah.
infinite.
Yeah.
So you are getting blessed infinitely. So technically speaking, they're not wrong. You are getting 100-fold. It's
Mm.
just maybe not in the now.
Not in like
The
the material
Yeah,
worldly like
not
resource, right?
yeah. I'd say not necessarily in that, but
Yeah.
it can happen. Like for example, I give, but then somehow my house price increases. And it's like that's ultimately God's favor. That's ultimately God's hand. And so yes, there is that whole thing of like, no, not necessarily in terms of physical material, but it also can happen,
Mm.
because God is with us. And
Mm.
so when He gives us, it means that, oh, now I have even more to give. Now I have even more to bless others.
Mm.
And so I think it leads us to that whole Bible verse where it's like what you've been given a little, and you do great with it, God will give you more.
Mm.
But that's not more for yourself. That's more so that you can give.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think sometimes people get it wrong and they go, "Oh, that's more for me." Yeah,
Yeah.
sweet. Oh, that means I get to buy a bigger house. But no, actually, it's more to give.
Mm.
Yeah, and so yeah, it this is the next question. We'll try to go through it. I think we've got a couple left. But how can being content show others that you trust God?
It's it's just faith, Alfred. That's a Zack Snyder Justice League quote, but it's just faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I I don't know. It for me, if I think about it like that, it's it gives me peace. It gives me so much peace to be like I'm happy with what I have, and if if it hurts a little to give what I have, what I need, or what I have, then I think like in the long term, what I'm rewarded with is so much more peace. And like in this is gonna get a little bit existential, but in today's society, I feel like it's a lot more complicated to exist than it did a long time ago. Um, with so many social and like political and personal things to deal with in this world,
Hmm.
it's it's very hard to find peace because you're always chasing the next goal, always like moving forward, always like going for the next thing in your life. It's to be someone who is successful or like present in today's society, you kind of have to keep going. And it's
Yeah.
hard to find that peace when you're always on the move, constantly like moving through things. So yeah, I don't know. Tangent, maybe.
No,
Yeah.
no, I think it's good.
Yeah.
I think ultimately trusting God leads to peace,
Mm.
and being able to, part ways with what you have. And I wouldn't say it's a blanket thing because there are mistakes that we can make. And I'm
Mm.
not saying like every time you give is the right decision.
Mm.
Sometimes you may foolishly give. You may get ahead of yourself and you may do things that God is not leading you to do. He's not saying give to everybody,
Mm.
right? And I think that's why it says the whole thing of in that verse, right? Where is it? Um, what was it? Where is it? Where is it?
Was it the expense?
Yeah, the expense. We don't want others to have it easy at your expense. I think there's still that whole idea of sometimes your generosity, it's possible to get it wrong. It's possible to go too far. But I think what's important is actually being under God's leading and God's prompting. And so that requires being his sheep, And so when you're God's sheep, you're around God a lot. And it's like the Bible says, my sheep hear my voice, right? Which means that how do you hear God's voice? You have to just keep, reading the Bible more. Then you understand the tone of God's voice, the tone of his prompting. And then over time, as God just prompts you, you go, oh, that is God. Yep, my sheep hear my voice. Oh, I am his sheep. I do hear that. And so you follow and you do it. Yeah. And so I'd say, yeah, it's one of those things. And sometimes it would just require a failure.
Yeah.
Make a mistake. Then you course correct, So Shannon, you might end up giving too much one day. Then you course correct. You just go, oh, reassess, is this really sustainable? Is this where, my life is heading? Is this what I should be doing? Is God asking me to do something else in the midst of this,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so there's always, and that's the thing with even life, is that being okay with, taking that step of faith, risking that step of faith, and sometimes you might be wrong, but that's okay, because that's what leaders are. Leaders are people who take that risk, step out, similar to what I shared on Sunday. Those who weren't in the podcast, we have a leaders meeting on Sunday. Yeah. Shannon, any thoughts about that? Being content, how can being content show others that you trust God?
I guess if you're content and you're happy with what you have, it shows that you trust that God's able to keep giving you the things that that you currently need. Right. So let's say you live comfortably and you're giving with the extra you have, and you're content, and you don't necessarily want more. It'd be nice to have more, but you're happy with the way you're living. You're living comfortably, and you don't need a bigger house, for example, right? And you think that this house is enough for you. And it's you trust God to keep providing you with the things you actually need to sustain yourself, while being able to just enjoy what God gives you, rather than just continuously greed for more and go, you know what, God isn't going to give me what I want, so I'm going to get it myself. And then you end up digging yourself a bigger hole, like what Harold said before.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah. So
the whole idea of wanting to satisfy your needs is insatiable. You end up just going I've got that, now I want another thing, now I want another thing, and it's just constantly, I want more, I want more, I want more, because the heart of it comes out of a desire for self-gain. And so it's about I. And so you always desire more. You want a better computer, you want a better, TV, you want better food, you want a better job. It's always more. And if you're focusing on that, it's only going to lead you down that path to want more, because that's your goal. But if your goal is to be in line with God's heart, then that, hey, God's going to look after me. He's got my back, and I can trust him. Yeah. So how we're going to the last question, and then we'll wrap it up. So how does social media affect our ability to learn and to be content with what we have? I love this question. I guess it wraps it up pretty well. And it's something we touched on a couple of weeks ago. I think, Nick, you mentioned it.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can answer this question for us.
So with social media, there's a lot of content to consume. A lot of content that we don't even know that we're consuming, but a lot of it is meant to enter your brain that way so that it's easier for you to digest. A little bit of context, but basically you have these social media influencers talking about all these things, or these tech reviewers checking out the new stuff, right? People living big lives, going on big holidays, trying new challenges that probably cost a lot of money to do or organize. It's it's only showing the good stuff, and it makes you want to have that because it depicts a form of happiness, and it seems as if they're content with their lives because they get to have all these things, they get to do all these things. And so in that way, when you're consuming this content, subconsciously over time, you're going to start feeling like you need these things to be content. You need to have the new things. You need to be doing these big challenges or going out of your way to do big things in life to be content. And it builds on that whole idea of wanting more, needing more, and very human things, I suppose, like to just search for the next thing
Yeah.
to consume. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And one of the things that's tough is you actually, when you're on social media, you're seeing someone else's life, and then you see your own life, and you just go like, wait a minute, I just had an argument with my wife, you know? Why is this person's marriage so nice? Like, they're having dinners, they're going on holidays, you know? And you scroll through their entire Instagram feed, and it's like a holiday, you know, fancy dinner. It's like all that kind of stuff, and you go like, whoa, like, why don't I have that? Why is my life not like that? And then you look at what's missing in your life.
Yeah.
But the reality is social media lies to us because it tells us that it's actually showing us just someone else's highlight reel. It's just
Yeah.
showing someone else's great life, just because that's all they show. You know, over the past 10 years, they may put up 50 pictures, you know, but you don't see what happens in their life outside of that.
Right.
And so it puts you in a place where you're comparing their best self to your everyday self, you know?
I like that
Yeah.
quote. Good quote.
Yeah, write it down.
Yeah,
I feel
wise
like-
words from Harold,
Yeah.
from Pastor Harold.
Yeah, and yeah, and I think it can affect us. And I think if you were to compare it to the old days before we had social media, we actually still had the same issue, where it's comparing with others, but back then it required us to sit face to face with somebody. I'd have dinner with Nick and Shannon. We would talk about our lives, and we'd share our highlight reels, and you'd be like, oh man, why isn't my life like that, you know? And
Right.
it still happened back in the day.
Yeah.
Why
But
isn't my child
now,
like that?
Oh,
now it's so condensed that I
Yeah.
see Nick's feed, I see Shannon's feed, I see Pastor Chris's feed, I see,
Yeah.
you know, 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people's feeds, and they're all doing so great. Why is my life not great? And so it amplifies that to a whole new level.
Yeah.
And that's what social media is doing. It's not something new. It's just what we had already, but amplified.
Reminds you of like when like your parents sit down at like family dinner and they're just like, you know, my son is like this, and
Yeah.
you know, like
Extended
why
family
isn't your
dinners, yeah.
son like that?
Yeah,
Sort
No.
of thing.
yeah.
And it's like, oh my
It's
goodness,
more
like,
like
oh,
You're being
I
compared
sit
to your
down.
cousin who
Yeah,
has
you're
like the
compared
to
best
your
grades.
goodness.
yes.
Yeah.
You know, your cousin Michelle did this last week. She got this award. What are you doing with your life? Yeah, 100%. And
Yeah.
so this question, maybe we go back to kids ministry a little bit. It's definitely relating back to comparison. You know, like the whole idea of comparison leads you to discontentment. When you compare and you look at what's missing in your life, you start to get discontent. But actually, the way to be content, and to answer this question, learning to be content in the midst of social media, in the midst of parents comparing you to your cousins, is actually going like, actually, this is what I bring to the table. I might not be a good public speaker like somebody, right? I may not be a good leader, or you know, be a loud and talkative, energetic person, but you know what? God's created me this way. God's created me to be me, the best me. And that was something. Maybe I'll close off with this thought, and it was I think I might have said it last week, but it was just at the GLS summit that I went to, the leadership summit, and they said if you look to someone else and you try to be like them, you're always going to fall short. You're never going to end up being like them because you're not them, right? So then if you work your whole life to be like them, you're going to end up being just another person, another replica, another
Yeah,
thing.
you said this. Yeah.
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 But if you look to embrace what God's created you to be, you look to embrace your uniqueness, your different abilities and different strengths, then you're going to be a one of a kind. You're going to be the only Nick Nguyen. You're going to be the only Shuan Ung.
Nice.
You're going to be the only one. And that is valuable.
The only phone.
Yeah. Being one of a kind means that only FGA kids gets Shuan Ung and only gets Min Long Nguyen, right?
Oh yeah.
Thanks, Harold.
Exposed.
Yeah,
But
thanks.
you'll be the only one. And you don't exist anywhere else, which means that you are special to that ministry. You are special to that family, you know, to that industry, to that workplace that you go to in the future. And once you grasp that fully, you end up, you know, soaring because you embrace yourself and you do you the best. And I reckon that probably is where we land. Probably close off there. So how about I invite Shannon to pray for us?
All right. Dear Lord, I thank you for this time that we've had together to just learn more about you and to keep diving deeper in these topics, Lord. I pray that we'll be better equipped on Sunday as well, and that you'll just be there with us every step of the way and show us how to be content and to be generous and to embrace the best versions of ourselves. Dear Lord, I pray that you'll continue to be with us every step of the way as well, and just let us I guess give us maybe some reminders throughout our week, things that we see and stuff like that, and ways to keep and giving us, I guess, the persistence to keep being content and being and following after your word, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Cool. Well, that's all for this month. We'll see you next week for a new topic, which we will share next week. So,
yeah, stay tuned, folks.
yeah, stay tuned.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Bye,
Those who
guys.
missed last week's, make sure you catch up on last week's. Remember to like, subscribe, and,
Comment, share.
click the bell icon.
Yeah.
Yeah, click the bell icon.
The harder you click, the more you love God.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you really following Christ if you haven't clicked the bell? Click the bell.
Oh. Wow.
All right.